5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
You're listening to Working Forward, presented by Symetra. In this limited podcast series, hosted by Todd Zen, we explore the future of work from a variety of viewpoints and discuss the challenges and opportunities ahead.
Hello, and welcome to the latest installment of the Working Forward podcast. I'm Todd Zen, your host, and we are very pleased you've joined us for our latest conversation in the series. Today's conversation is something that I know for a fact is on everyone's mind. Certainly, if you're listening to this podcast, I know it is on yours, and that is the concept of retirement. It's not something that's far from really anybody's thoughts while you're a part of the working world and you're planning for the future. And I am very pleased to welcome a very special guest from inside our walls here at Symetra who can really opine on this and really help us have a great conversation about retirement benefits and also the intersection with what we do in the employee benefit space with employer benefits as well. So that very special guest is our Senior Vice President of Product Management for Symetra's Retirement Division, and his name is Kevin Rabin. So Kevin, welcome to the show. And if you wouldn't mind, please share with our audience a little bit of background about yourself and your role here at Symetra.
Thanks, Todd. Happy to be here. Longtime listener, first time podcaster. So I'm Kevin Rabin, been in the industry for almost 25 years now, at Symetra for 19. So as Todd said, had a product for the retirement division, so responsible for product development, product management, competitive intelligence. So again, background as an actuary and really got more into a product development role kind of throughout my career.
Well, that's excellent. So speaking of product, can you share with the audience just high level what we offer, Symetra, in the retirement space? What are some key product portfolio highlights?
Yeah, happy to. So our suite on the annuity side consists of fixed annuities, so fixed rate guarantees, fixed indexed annuities, which again provide upside potential tied to an index with no downside risk, registered index linked annuities or RILAs that provide partial downside protection in exchange for upside, and then SPIAs, so guaranteed lifetime income products. We primarily sell through third parties, so banks, broker dealers, warehouses are really our primary modes of distribution on the retirement side.
Excellent. So bringing this together, the intersection of employee benefits and retirement, I'm really interested in your perspective on how you think about the employee benefit space, the retirement products offered therein, how that compares with what you guys sell through your various broker partners and distribution partners. And, ultimately, what is that intersection point? I think we all know in the employee benefit space that 401ks are the huge vehicle that folks use to fund retirements. We'll be talking about health savings accounts quite a bit today in this conversation as well, which is a high potential retirement or at least a high potential product to help fund medical expenses in retirement, very prevalent in the employee benefit space. But how do you think about that when you think about the fixed annuities you just mentioned and the things you sell? How does that intersect those two type of products?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like there's for the broader population, probably the largest possible intersection between really employee benefits, supplemental benefits, and saving for the long term. And why is that? So again, where do people go to look to meet their healthcare needs, supplemental benefit needs? Where do they start is their employer. Where's the most important starting point for someone looking to save for the long term for the average American? It's their 401k or their 403b with their employer, supplemented with their own savings outside of their 401k, supplemented by things like Social Security, but for the broader population, really all beginning with the employer. Later on, perhaps supplementing that with something they might buy outside of their 401k, using their IRA to transition to some of the other products we just talked about. But to me, it really all starts with the employer. So I think kind of the next thing I think about in terms of the intersection is just how important covering those supplemental benefits are for someone to save for the long term, especially earlier in life. So, Todd, you and I have talked a lot about Gen X and done a lot of research on Gen X in particular, and trying to understand how we can help them save for retirement. And we found that, by and large, it seemed like they knew they should be saving. They understood kind of the benefits of saving, but why weren't they? What was getting in the way? It was the unexpected expenses. What was one of the biggest unexpected expenses? Like in health-related triggered expenses. So kind of there's the intersection, right? So if you understand the need to save for the long term, one of the biggest things to get in your way might be the unexpected, and you can actually cover that with your employer via supplemental benefits or via healthcare, then all of a sudden you've got the biggest trigger, kind of the biggest impediment to saving for the long term covered. And so really, I think you have to think about them in tandem, right? Like one of the best reasons to buy supplemental benefits might be to actually remove one impediment to save for the long term. So again, I think there's just a huge intersection when you think about covering those types of expenses and doing so, being able to save for the long term.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that really hits on positioning that we talk a lot about in the benefits division. We don't sell 401ks. We don't sell or administer health savings accounts, which again, we'll talk about more in a moment. But what we sell very much does support maximizing those products, to your point. So, and that's really fascinating research. We talk a lot about generational differences, generational challenges on this podcast, and Gen X is right in that sweet spot where retirement's not tomorrow, but if retirement's not on your radar and you haven't been planning for it, that's a very challenging position to be. So facilitating that for them and like the Symetra value of empowering people to live with financial freedom, I think that's what we need to be doing for Gen X right now. I've spoken as a member of Gen X, right? This is very, very important stuff. So I actually do want to talk about health savings accounts for a minute. So if you're not familiar with them, a health savings account is actually something that's offered generally in concert with your medical insurance. And there's certain provisions, certain requirements that your health insurance needs to have a certain type of high deductible, and there's some requirements there. But ultimately, what that health savings account is a funding vehicle that your employer can put money into, and you can also put money into as well on a tax-free basis. And then those funds become a bank of funds that you can use that belong to you, by the way. If you change jobs, it doesn't stay with your employer. It does belong to you, and you can use those funds to pay for medical expenses without any tax implications. So that's tax-free access to the money. But there's another wrinkle here as well, that those funds can be invested. And once they're invested, the growth in the accounts, should the investment grow, is not taxed. And if you were to use this fund for medical expenses in, say, retirement, per our topic today, you also could access it tax-free. So this is something that I think financial advisors will tell you has enormous potential for funding a retirement and being that medical expense asset. And by the way, everyone can expect to have significant medical expenses in retirement. That is a very foundational point of retirement planning as well. So an HSA is this super valuable thing. And when I think about the benefits division, when we sell supplemental health products like critical illness insurance for a major illness or hospital indemnity for hospitalization, we're providing you with benefits that can then be used to pay for some of these medical expenses without tapping into the HSA, right? And without that kind of opportunity cost and losing that investment potential. So I guess, Kevin, to bounce it back to you, HSAs, I imagine you consider to be very powerful as well for retirement planning. And, like I said, we think about it a lot in the benefits division, but anything you'd share with our audience about HSAs?
No, I totally agree with your point. So, it's taking a step back, always starting with the customer persona in mind. Kind of, we just talked about a customer need, which is something that allows them to cover kind of unexpected expenses that might be medical expenses, that helps them kind of save for retirement for the long term. And that's exactly kind of the use case you described for the HSA, right? So you've got the supplemental benefits for more kind of more of the day-to-day medical needs. You've got the HSA for maybe more of the unexpected needs leading into retirement. And should those needs not arise, you can use those post-retirement for healthcare needs or other things, right? So kind of starting with the customer that really is doing exactly what we just talked about, kind of something that really combines the unexpected with should that unexpected not occur. Now you have this vehicle that you've used to save for the long term. So I think it's a perfect example of really the industry having a solution out there. And to me, a lot of it is education, financial literacy. Does everyone understand that this is out there? Do they understand kind of how an HSA could be used? I don't think so. So like making sure that we're framing the HSA as something that can do what we're talking about here and helping people really understand really the value and the flexibility that the HSA provides. I think it really all starts with that education, that literacy, and yeah, I think that's a really useful tool to have in the toolbox for someone who's maybe starting out younger and looking to save for the long term. I think it's a great solution.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I building on what you said about education. Sometimes I think about HSAs as almost like the best kept secret out there.
Mhm.
I've spoken to a lot of my friends that have HSAs, and they think, oh, that's that little bit of money that my employer gives me, and I spend it on my medical expenses, and I'm like, well, maybe it's that, but what if you used it this way? And I don't, I don't think there's that understanding. And I think it's really great to be able to kind of bring that education out and have folks maximize the assets. So pivoting to 401ks, I'm hoping you can help me understand something because I will be the first to admit I do not. But I have been reading and seeing that annuities are actually becoming something that can be offered, within that 401k type environment. And I'm wondering if that's something you can educate me on and the audience on and talk a little bit about how something like that might work.
Sure. Yeah, just really starting from the beginning. So the idea would be kind of an annuity embedded within a 401k plan. Looking 5+ years ago, there are reasons why really the door wasn't open to that at all. It was just that there was fiduciary responsibility with the employer and even offering that on their platform. And really, that just wasn't an option. With the Secure Act, I'd say it cracked the door open a little bit for that to even be a possibility. So that kind of opened the door to a conversation from an industry perspective about having an annuity within a 401k that might be portable for someone to take from one employer to the next. However, with opening the door, there was a lot more room to go in terms of opening that door all the way. So that really eliminated probably the biggest restriction for kind of progress in this space, but really so many more questions then left to solve in terms of feasibility and kind of what does that look like. So really just naming a few, one is, what does that annuity solution look like? We've talked about kind of our own suite. See, there are annuity solutions out in the world that truly just you put in a lump sum of money, you're guaranteed income for life. You die earlier than you had hoped. Sometimes money goes to your beneficiaries. Sometimes it is truly a lifetime guarantee, but there isn't kind of liquidity in between. There are other solutions out there that provide more liquidity or kind of more flexibility to say you're guaranteed income for life, but if the unexpected happens, medical expenses, other needs for that cash, there is some possibility for you to take some of that out as a lump sum in exchange for a reduction in your future income. So one is kind of what does that solution look like? And then there's really lots of other questions from there in terms of from a technology perspective, integrating this into a 401k plan is complex. And there are kind of firms out there looking to mitigate that. The idea of portability from one plan to the next is complicated. If you've got an employer that offers an annuity and one that doesn't, how do you make this annuity portable from one to the next? There's questions on fees and how do fees work within this plan. Maybe I'll end with kind of education. Again, this starts to get a little bit more complicated. How does our Gen Xer know what makes sense for them? How do they understand the options that are in front of them in terms of saving for the long term? When you add something like an annuity, especially if you imagine kind of a portfolio of kind of multiple annuities that might have multiple features, it definitely gets a little bit more complicated from a broker perspective, from an employer perspective, and from an employee perspective. So I'd say that the solution is great because, again, where do people start in terms of thinking about healthcare needs and saving for long term? They start with their employer. So again, the more we can do to make that intersection even greater, I think is great. So there's been a couple solutions out there that are now out there. I think they're getting good press. I think it's like steps in the right direction for our industry. And I do think there's a lot more work to be done from our industry, from the technology, operational, ease of use, education, kind of everything I just talked about over the long term, but it's definitely an exciting development for our space.
Yes, very exciting, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch it evolve. From where I sit, building products that are enrolled during the online enrollment process, that is a very difficult thing. 401ks are enrolled at the same time as employee benefits, and that's a tough moment to get people's attention and to educate them properly. And to the extent that it adds a lot of complication in that process, I think that's going to really limit adoption. But that's, I guess, the negative side. The positive side is, once it can be figured out and added in a digestible and easily understood manner, what great potential something like that could have to make a 401k stronger. So I think it'll be very interesting to watch that evolve.
Yeah, well said. I think that kind of the next challenge for our industry is to make it easy to buy, easy to understand, easy to kind of interact with through your kind of your life. And I think that's really the challenge for all of us. But I guess it's a great challenge for us to all to be taking on.
Something to work on for sure. So
Exactly.
let me hit you with a big broad question, and maybe you can draw on some of the generational research you've done, because again, as we mentioned, I think thinking about Gen X is probably perfect when you think about these kind of questions. But have you noticed any significant gaps in how folks are planning for retirement and wellness and a healthy, happy retirement? Obviously, you mentioned the unexpected expenses that may be holding folks back from contributing as much as they need. So that's certainly a factor. But is there any sort of gap in thinking, right, where you have this big unknown? You don't know how long you'll live. You maybe won't know how, inflation might impact you or things like that. So it's difficult to plan for to begin with. But are there any big gaps that you've noticed in your either your generational research or your product research? And how can the products that you sell help address some of those gaps?
Yeah, no, great question. Maybe a couple things that come to mind. We've had a little bit. One is flexibility. So again, even when someone has a plan, making sure that that plan is flexible enough for the unexpected need to happen and to be able to kind of do something about that. So kind of thinking about the solutions that are out there in the context of like understanding that people aren't necessarily ready to kind of dedicate a certain amount of kind of what they've saved for the long term because they're concerned about the unexpected getting away. So just thinking about positioning our products and building our products such that there is some flexibility built in. To education, I think we've talked about that already. Again, just people understanding what's out there and understanding maybe the way they should be thinking about saving for the long term. Third is maybe making this interactive. Again, I kind of use that word already. Again, acknowledging that this isn't a one-time thing that someone plans once and they're good for the rest of their lives. This probably needs to be something that someone can interact with once they start. Interact with, see how they're doing, what changes do they need to be making to their plan, and can you actually make it engaging? We've definitely talked about gamification, one of my favorite things. Can it actually be fun, rewarding, engaging to stay for the long term as opposed to a chore, right? So like what can we do to actually encourage people to do this, to actually want to wake up and think about how their retirement plan is doing and what can I do to make it better? I think that's the fun part, is trying to think through kind of the ideation about like, how do we make this all less of a chore, less mind numbing, kind of more exciting, saving for the long term. So I do think that maybe there is a gap there to kind of for the industry to think about, like, yeah, how do we make this a fun, engaging process, something that people are excited about when they think about what is otherwise maybe a daunting task of trying to figure out how to save for the long term.
That makes a lot of sense. Without revealing any names or any information, I can tell you that one of my accounts has a similar kind of gamification thing where there's like a little roadmap and then there's a little car and there's a goal. And I like logging in and seeing if that car is getting any closer to that goal. And
I love it.
it's such a simple thing, right? But it makes it sort of fun and engaging to want to
Exactly.
look at, right?
I love that. Yep.
So let me ask what I think is a related question, and it's something that we talk a lot about in employee benefits, and I have to think that this is top of mind for you as well, and it's the role of technology and the role of personalization. So we have a lot of tools, but I think we're really just scratching the surface on this in employee benefits for how do we use technology to help recommend the insurance products somebody should buy, what they should enroll for during open enrollment, but not with generic advice, but personalized advice, whether it's something that somebody's self-identifying with via a survey or something more sophisticated where you can pull in somebody's actual medical experience and then recommend products that go along with it. But this is an amazing opportunity. Then you think about artificial intelligence and all of that way to process kind of big data. So I'm wondering if you've seen these type of tools emerge, if it's something that we're using or championing at all, because I think you said it in your last answer very well. It's also retirement planning is an evolving thing. It's not a one size fits all approach. It's also highly personal. So any thoughts on kind of the use of, and it could be the use of technology more broadly, but I'm especially interested in using technology to help give personalized advice.
Love that question. I feel like in the olden days, which is maybe 12 months ago, 24 months ago, we would talk about kind of Googling retirement and like, what are people that are thinking about retirement see when they Google that topic, what comes first? What does that solution to the solutions that are laid out first contemplate annuities or not? So we've talked about things in that framework. We've talked about robo advisors and kind of what that looks like. How does a robo advisor think about annuities? Now, I would start with all things AI and kind of acknowledging that I think people will be leveraging AI to help them think about their long-term savings. And so, how do annuities fit in from an AI perspective today? And then just think about the use of AI for saving for the long term in ways that we probably haven't even begun to contemplate. The idea to really hyper personalize your retirement plan, really based on kind of the details that are really related to you in particular, like again, what you have saved, your risk tolerance, kind of how you think about saving for the long term, even things like your health details, the things that might get in the way of you saving for the long term from a health perspective, your family history, your kind of your longevity history of your family, things that are really hyper sensitive, hyper personalized to you, your life, your background. Think about kind of planning kind of one-on-one with AI from that perspective. And then you think about, again, now coaching from an AI perspective. So like, who do you go to see how you're doing, what progress you're making? Is that car moving in the right direction? You're probably then you're going to AI that has your plan, and you're probably going to it to kind of see how you're doing, what might be getting in the way. Do I need to think about my plan differently? I think that could be huge. And again, I feel like we've barely skimmed the surface, even if at all, on the role that AI can and probably will play in the way that people think about retirement, people think about saving for the long term. So again, trying to think early of, again, how do our all of our solutions fit in to the mix? Like, how do we make sure that these tools are kind of contemplating annuities, contemplating supplemental benefits in the right way early on, I think will be super important for really the future of planning for the long term, which is a really cool topic to think about.
It really is. Yeah, I get excited just thinking about I want to use it, right? I've always found retirement hard to do benchmarking. You know, you want to understand how am I doing versus for my age and my circumstances versus, you know, where I should be, you know, things like that. And I've always found that whenever you do benchmark that stuff, it's just highly generalized and I don't feel like I'm actually getting any meaningful insight. But if you could actually get a little bit more granular about all those things you brought up, whether it's longevity or income or, you know, geography, all these, there's so many factors, right? So it's really exciting to think that, you know, tools like that could be coming down the road. So my next question for you, the answer might be the answer you just gave. And if it is, that's okay. But I'm wondering what excites you most about this moment in time in the world of retirement, in helping people plan for the future. It could be a product, it could be a technology, could be anything. But what has you most excited and optimistic at the moment?
Yeah, I think it probably is a lot of what we talked about. It's education. It's again the fact that this is top of mind for more and more people, and again the ability to teach people early some of the benefits of saving for the long term. Understand that's probably the most important thing we can do to help them be ready is to help them early. Technology and how those things can tie together, and again, how can we leverage technology? How can we make it engaging? How can we make it fun to get them engaged in this process early? You know, some of the developments, but again, HSAs are out there. There's some developments in the kind of the student loan 401k intersection that I think are pretty interesting in terms of an employer being able to look at a student loan payment and actually use that to do a status match within their 401k. I think there's cool things happening from kind of the perspective of just like what is happening within the US to kind of, again, continue to help people save for the long term. But I mean, I feel like the leading indicators are all really heading in the right direction. You think about again 401ks within annuities and what that could mean for the future. But you know, there's lots of I think reasons to be excited about just the potential for all of us, the potential for this industry, the potential for Gen X and the younger generations to really be able to engage with solutions that'll help them save for the long term in a way that they'll actually be excited about.
Yeah, that's all fantastic. So I think this all leads up to my final question for you. And you know, ultimately, I love working with you. I like the opportunity to put our heads together, and I don't want to give away any of our secret sauce, but I do want to see how we can collaborate more and solve some of these big challenges, right? And it's we think even if we don't sell retirement products and benefits, we think about it all the time. It is a key element to the products we build and how we think about things. And here you are building and very active in this space and, you know, providing retirement solutions. So broadly speaking, any thoughts on how we can put our heads together and, you know, really mash up this benefits and retirement world in a way that, you know, could really disrupt things?
Yeah, no, I love that. Breaking down silos to start having the retirement guy on your podcast, good start. So thank you. I'm definitely honored to
We're
be
on our
part of
way.
this. Check that box. Um, and again, I think we come back to the intersection again and just like understand there's when you understand the customer and you're starting with them, just understand the employee. There's such a big intersection between again healthcare, supplemental benefits, having those things covered, maybe having the HSA on top of that, and then using all those things to set someone up to be successful at saving for the long term. So just thinking about the way we market, how we talk about our products in that way to kind of help again acknowledge that from the customer's perspective, that's what is important to them, and that's kind of how these packages or products come together. I think is huge. Again, I like the HSA because it can kind of morph from something that can be used to save for healthcare to something that can help you in your retirement. So are there other solutions that we could be in the lab building? They're going to contemplate the, you know, meeting multiple of those needs at the same time, I think that would be fun endeavor as well. I would definitely look forward to that.
Okay, well, I think we should definitely set up some time outside of this podcast to work through some specific ideas. But but I will say, just to summarize, I think starting with the customer is always the best place to start. I think that's what we do here at Symetra. That's in our DNA, and what we'll continue to try to do. And what I like about working in the benefits division as well is that the employer is also the customer, and if you can make a employer look good and make them an employer of choice by having these great kind of products that help folks retire and make people want to work there. I mean, all of this stuff is a beautiful synergy. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up here. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a really fun conversation, and we have really enjoyed having you on the show.
A lot of fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Excellent. Well, thanks again. And thank you to our audience. We really appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And we will look forward to speaking with you soon. Thanks so much.
You're listening to Working Forward, Future of Work podcast series. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Symetra Life Insurance Company or its affiliates.